Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Asta's Experience Talk. I say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening because I don't know where you are, but we have many people from all over joining us today. We have consumers, travelers, travel agencies, and advisors. So I want to say welcome to you all, regardless of the time zone you're in. Ask the Experience Talks is the opportunity for you to listen in and learn from some of our very experienced advisors. So my name is Mark Meter. I'm ASTA's Senior Vice President of Industry Affairs and Education. As many of you may know, ASTA is the American Society for Travel Advisors. And today, we're going to talk a bit about what you need to know about travel documents. And I think you'll find that very enlightening because there's so much to know, especially as we move to the next normal as a result of the pandemic. And I'm happy to have with me here today my friend and colleague, Rick Ardis. Rick is with Ardis Travel in East Rutherford, New Jersey. And I understand, Rick, that you're celebrating your 40th anniversary. Ardis Travel is celebrating your 40th anniversary this year. Many of you may know Rick. He previously served as the president of the New Jersey chapter of ASTA. He's quite accomplished and a firm believer of continuing education and training. In fact, he has a multitude of designations, including being an ASTA Verified Travel Advisor, his CTA from the Travel Institute, and even his ACC from CLIA. With that, I want to welcome Rick to join me today. For our audience, I want to ask that you let us know in the comments section where you're from. We welcome you all. Let us know where you're from, and also use the comments field to enter any questions you might have for Rick. So getting to our subject at hand, it seems like no matter what's happening with the pandemic, travelers have to have their papers in order to travel. And again, as I said initially, Rick, there's just so many nuances with travel documentation, especially during the pandemic. Everything ranging from TSA PreCheck, global entry, clear, what's all that, visas, and I don't mean the credit card, I mean the visa you might need to travel to another country, crossing a border with children or without children. What's it mean to travel with children on a cruise line? What about non-US citizens with green cards? And then ultimately, I want to close with talking a little bit about traveling during COVID. What about proof of vaccines, negative COVID testing, and even proof of recovery? So with that, Rick, I'm going to turn it over to you. And if you would just briefly say a couple of words about yourself, and then let's dig in and maybe talk about, in no particular order, any of the topics that I just mentioned. Over to you, Rick.
Hello, Mark. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
As Mark mentioned, Ardis Travel is turned 40 years old this past March. Unfortunately, we didn't get to celebrate it too much. The business was started by myself and my mother. She had been in the industry previously, so I've been around travel for most of my life. And additionally, for 21 years, I did work for the ground handler for the cruise lines in the New York and New Jersey area. I worked for numerous cruise lines in Bayonne and Manhattan. So I've seen a lot of the issues of people coming to the pier and not having proper documentation. So things keep changing and we need to keep up on them. And the first one is Real ID. Real ID has been enacted a number of years ago after 9/11, but the start date has been pushed back numerous times, the most recent time because of the pandemic. Many states including New Jersey, were very late to get started issuing Real ID compliant driver's licenses or ID cards. And the way to tell if your driver's license is for Real ID, here's a sample of the New Jersey one. You will either have a black or gold star or an inverted star in a circle, or in the case of California, who likes to be different, they have it the star is in a bear. And if you see the standard license, it now says not for Real ID purposes. Real ID is for a couple of reasons, but the most important one to us is to board a domestic flight. And that new start date is scheduled for May 3rd of 2023. So New Jersey still is offering both types of driver's licenses because it does take a little extra effort to get the Real ID compliant ones, but other states, they only have the option of the Real ID compliant driver's license. It is also if you're needing to visit certain federal installations, specifically military installations. And again, that applies just to domestic. For international, of course, you need a passport. So the next slide.
Rick, can I just jump
Yes,
in and ask you?
surely.
I think that Real ID was triggered as a result of the 9/11 incident.
Yes, it was.
The federal government tried to, or desired to, put in place more stringent guidelines to help with overall security. And that's why there's the whole Real ID standard being implemented over the last couple of years, right?
Right. The implementation got delayed because so many of the state motor vehicle, or in New Jersey's Motor Vehicle Commission, were needed to be upgraded their data systems, and it just took time. And the larger the state, the harder it was to get it done. There's also an enhanced driver's license, and an enhanced driver's license also confirms citizenship. Most people say, well, doesn't my driver's license prove I'm a citizen? No, you don't need to be a citizen to drive. You just need to get a driver's license. But these 5 border states, they have the enhanced driver's license, which allows you to cross the border into Canada without having to have a passport. You have to be vetted by the state motor vehicle office, but you also need to prove that you are a valid U.S. citizen. And Canada will accept these to enter, and the U.S. will accept them to come back. They were meant for commuters. They weren't meant for travelers. They were, if you notice, all these are border states. So, in the Buffalo, Niagara area, you have people who cross the Niagara River regularly for work or whatever, and come back in the same day. So that's what they use these for. You have Washington, with Bellingham being so close to Vancouver. Detroit and Windsor are practically in one place. So these, again, they can be used on a cruise, but they to board the ship, if you're cruising on a closed loop cruise, which begins and ends in the same port and travels in the North America basin, which is Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean.
Rick, Tara Trusclair is asking us if the passport card can act as a Real ID in the U.S. if you have a passport.
Yes, there are numerous alternatives to a Real ID compliant driver's license, including a passport card, a passport, and then there are other programs like Global Entry, and you can use those cards. We have a slide on that also. Michelle, could you bring that up? The next one, please. Okay, there's the passport card. The difference between a passport book and a passport card is that the traditional one on the left is allows you to travel anywhere internationally. The passport card, again, was designed for people who cross the border frequently. It's only good to cross the border by land or sea to the Caribbean, Mexico, and Canada, the North America basin. So it, again, was intended for people who, like truck drivers, who are driving back and forth between Canada and the US and Mexico and the US. But it can be used as per the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, the WHTI. You can use it to travel on a cruise, but it's not recommended because if you have an emergency, whether it's an emergency at home that you need to get back, or you missed the ship, you cannot fly home from a foreign country without having a passport book. And additionally, the passport book is needed if you are going to anywhere outside the North America basin, like Canada, Europe, South America, Asia, the rest of the world. You need a passport book. And then again on the next slide, Michelle, please. We have these programs that are called known traveler programs. Global Entry allows you to use the kiosk in the airport when you're returning to the US. And on my last trip home from Europe, don't even have to scan the passport anymore. They're using facial recognition. I just walked up to the kiosk and faced the camera, and it recognized me immediately and gave me my receipt, and I could proceed right through to the customs officer. You also have Nexus and Sentry. Nexus and Sentry are similar to Global Entry, but they are specific to Canada for Nexus and Mexico for Sentry. They are a way to speed you through the land borders. In the Buffalo Niagara area, there are 4 bridges that cross the Niagara River into Canada. One of them, being the Whirlpool Bridge, is only open to people that have a Nexus card because it's a radio, it's got an RFID chip in it, and the gate will not go up unless you have that card. You can use that. There's never a line, and it's just a way to speed your crossing of the border. And with these cards for Nexus, you need to be approved by both the US and Canada, and for Sentry by the US and Mexico. Additionally, we have TSA PreCheck and Clear. TSA PreCheck is a government program, and you can buy that as a subscription. If you have Global Entry, you automatically get TSA PreCheck. What that does is allows you to go through the expedited TSA checkpoints at the airport. Not every airline participates, not every terminal has it. For instance, at Newark Airport, currently they don't have it for all the airlines in Terminal B, but Terminal C for United has it. And then you have the Clear program, which is a private company. It started, I believe, in Orlando, and that is a separate subscription, and it's even speedier than TSA PreCheck, because what you do is it's biometric, either by your iris or by your fingerprints, and there are staff members there who will make sure that you're compliant, and then they take your boarding pass and walk you to the front of the TSA line, and you go right to the screener. You don't have to wait in the other line. So it's a great experience. We initially didn't have it at Newark. I was able to use it coming home back to Newark from Denver and from Fort Lauderdale, and then they finally have added it to Newark with the renovations.
Rick, I think one of the biggest benefits of TSA PreCheck is the fact that you don't have to take your shoes off, you don't have to take your laptop if you have one out of your bag, you don't have to take your handheld bottles or small bottles of whatever you may be carrying that are liquids out of your bag. You can keep your jacket on, etc. It's just much quicker. I like that. The other thing I recently noticed.
Mark, just before you move on from there, it is 95% of the time, yes, because if you go to some terminals, they may not have it open.
Yeah.
So you do get a card, and usually you don't have to take the shoes off, but sometimes you do have to stay in the regular line.
Right.
But it's still a great program, both of them.
Yeah. We have a question from Katie Smith Cienciola asking if children are included under the parent. If the parent has TSA PreCheck, are their children included as well, or do they need to have TSA PreCheck themselves?
I believe so. I really am not sure. We'll have to go on the TSA website to verify that. But I have seen children coming through. I think there is an age limit, and it definitely does not work if one parent has TSA PreCheck and the other does not. I have seen them take people out of the line, but I've seen the children go through. So like I said, I'm pretty sure that the children up to a certain age are covered with the parent, because with up to 17, you don't even need to have a photo ID for a domestic flight.
Right, right, right.
But
And
yes, every single person needs a passport if you're flying international, regardless of age, even newborns.
yeah, Ann Smith makes a good point here in our comments, saying that if you have any metal in your body, you will have to go through the full body scanner, even with TSA PreCheck. So that's a good point to bring
Yes,
up.
you should always let the TSA people know if you have any issues with not being able to go through the other screener because of metal anywhere, any implants in your body.
And our colleague Helen Procillo just confirmed that kids 12 and under can use the parents' PreCheck. So the age limit is 12.
Thank you, Helen. I can always depend on her. Okay. We very frequently hear the 6-month rule, and it's a very confusing thing because not every country requires a certain amount of validity for your passport when you're entering. And about half the Caribbean has a 6-month requirement. That is to say that it must be valid for 6 full months after your last day when you exit that country. Other countries do not have that requirement. In some places, it is a 3-month or 90-day requirement. And there's been some controversy because people have mentioned that some airlines have required that it be 6 months no matter where you're going, and even if that country does not require that. And I always, I wasn't sure. I didn't think that would be the case, but we did check with the State Department, and they advised that the airlines and the cruise lines can set stricter standards if you're traveling with them. So it is an important thing to check out, that you check the cruise line or the airline terms and conditions, because you could be denied boarding. That being said, a couple of years ago, we had the State Department speak at our ASTA Global Convention in Washington, D.C., and the woman from the State Department recommended that you should never let your passport go beyond 9 months remaining, that you should always renew your passport when it has about 9 months. It doesn't make sense to risk that you might have an opportunity to go someplace that's going to require a passport with 6 months validity remaining on it, and you not be able to go or have to try and get expedited service. And right now, it's not easy to get expedited service. They're taking 12 weeks to do some passports. Some people have reported that it's been done in 2 weeks, but you can't always count on that. So it's always a good idea to make sure your passport is valid. Another thing to make sure is that you sign your passport as soon as you get it, because it specifically says on there that it's not valid until it's signed. And I don't know if it's still the case, but Germany, if you were to disembark the aircraft in Germany and go to their customs officer and present an unsigned passport, you would be sent back to the US, and the carrier that brought you there would receive a fine. And additionally, you need to make sure your passport is kept in good condition. I've had the same passport holder for about 25 years. This was given to me by Virgin Atlantic Airways when they were brand new, and I'm on my 3rd passport in there, because if you let your passport go through the washing machine, it may invalidate it. There's been cases where children have gotten hold of their parents' passport and took a crayon to it again, invalidates the passport. So you need to go and get a new one reissued. So it's a good idea to have a cover and keep it in a safe place to make sure that it remains in good condition.
Rick, someone asked what the fee for TSA PreCheck is. I believe the fee is $85 for 5 years.
Yeah, I believe it's about $85 for TSA PreCheck, and global entry is about $100 for 5 years, and automatically comes with TSA PreCheck.
Right.
The Clear subscription, I think, is about $119 per year, but depending on the level you are with some frequent flyer programs or with some credit cards, you may get a discounted rate, or you may get a completely free membership in Clear. I get mine for $109 because I have a United Airlines credit card, and they entered into a deal with Clear to promote it.
And Clear, all Clear does is just expedite the already expedited TSA PreCheck process.
It just moves you right to the front of the line.
That's,
And I've never encountered more than 7 people in front of me when I've gone to a Clear line. Generally, there's 2 or 3 people there. And at Newark, I think they have 5 or 6 kiosks in Terminal C. So I've never waited more than 5 minutes to be processed.
Vicki Edwards is asking us, how do you choose between TSA PreCheck and global entry? I think you answered that, Rick.
Yeah, to me, there's no reason to choose. If you have a passport, you just automatically get global entry for $15 more. You're getting global entry and TSA PreCheck.
And global entry, in a nutshell, just gets you expedited re-entry into the United States from outside the U.S. when you're coming back across the border. If you don't travel a lot internationally, then you may not need it. But the price difference between the two is so small.
Right.
In my personal opinion, I think global entry is the better value.
Again, you can get TSA PreCheck without having a passport.
Yeah. Yeah.
Global entry, you have to have a passport. It's tied to your passport automatically.
Right.
The fee for Clear is an annual subscription. Sharon Refuge was asking that.
Right. And I think it's another point that you do not have to have TSA PreCheck in order to use Clear. Correct?
Right. There were, when I was coming home from Chicago, United had 2 different Clear, 2 different TSA security points. One was for Clear with TSA PreCheck, and one was for Clear without TSA. I just went through the one without because it was close to where I was and there was no line.
And I think for any of them, whether it's TSA PreCheck, global entry, or Clear, they're all charged on an annual basis.
Yes.
Yeah. And Rick, we're going to run out of time very quickly, so I'm hoping.
Okay. Well, let's move a little faster. Yeah. Getting back on a cruise, you do not need a passport to cruise. You can travel with a birth certificate and a photo ID or a passport card, but you need to remember that to come back to the U.S. by plane in case of an emergency, you need to have a passport book. The other thing is, people ask about a visa. A visa is permission by the other country for you to enter. Depending on the nation, it may be a long form that you need to fill out and have it added to your passport book. It's stamped or pasted in there. In particular, China and Russia, you need that. Some you purchase it online, like Australia, and it's very easy. When we went to Kenya, you just paid the $52 when you got there at the airport, but you needed to have other documentation to get in. So it's a very different process for each country. There are visa services that you can pay to have it done for you, and depending on where you are in the country, for us in the New York area and the Washington area, there's either embassies or consuls that we can go to and get them done in person. But if you're in, someplace distant from the major cities, it may be easier just to use the mail-in services of uh, a visa service company. And talk about traveling with children. If you're traveling in the U.S., it's pretty easy. If you're going to um, other countries, there are other requirements that, especially in families where the parents are not traveling together, whether they are together as a couple or they're just not traveling together, you may need a consent for travel from the other parent to bring the child. And I'm not sure how they are because the border's been closed for a while, but Canada used to be very, very strict on that because they are afraid of um, tampering with custody orders. That it's not uncommon for one parent to try and take the child out of the country away from the custodial parent. And also traveling with children, depending on their age on a cruise, very often, if there's more than 2 consecutive days at sea, the child must be at least a year old. Some cruise lines will not take children under a year. Some children cannot travel on a cruise if they're under 6 months. Additionally, you cannot travel on a cruise if you're generally more than 23 weeks pregnant at any time during the cruise, including the last day of the cruise when it comes back to the U.S. And um, people don't realize that the pregnant mother also needs a statement from her obstetrician that it's safe for her to travel in the condition, and she could be denied boarding. And you don't want to. That's the worst way to end your trip, is before it even starts. So you need to make sure that you have these things. They're all detailed in the company's terms and conditions. And like I said, working at the pier, very often there were people denied boarding for not having proper documentation for citizenship and being more than 23 weeks pregnant. And let's also touch on vaccines. It's very much a topic right now because certain places you can travel, but it's not anything new. On the left is the yellow vaccine card that we've had for years, and I have mine here from when I went to Africa, and then I have my COVID card here too. Keep it with your passport, and because certain countries, it's not as common as it was before, but I remember in the 70s, sometimes you still needed to go for vaccines going to certain places in Europe. And so this proof of vaccination has been around forever. And
Rick, what are some of the yellow card on the left that you show takes into account countries that might require, for example, a cholera vaccine or yellow fever vaccine, malaria pills, that sort of thing, correct?
Yeah, I had to do that for the safari in Africa. There was meningitis, there was yellow fever, cholera. There were quite a few. And now with the COVID card, the U.S. is one of the few places where it's a paper card. Most of Europe has a digital proof now, and depending on where you're going to, it could determine on what you need to enter. Certain countries, you can enter just proving your vaccine status. Other countries, you have to prove the vaccine status and take a test. The U.S. just this week changed the requirement for returning, that if you're vaccinated, you need to take your test within 72 hours. And if you're unvaccinated, you have to take it the day before. And the same thing when you're traveling to other countries, that it varies from country to country, and it varies from country to country within Europe. At times, we've seen that the Netherlands was not allowing Americans in, but neighboring Belgium was, and so it gets very complicated, and you need to stay up on that. And personally, our agency has two subscriptions, one called Dragon Slayer Travel and the other Sherpa, so that we can constantly check the requirements for the destination. Some of the Caribbean, I just saw an email earlier, Grenada lifted the quarantine requirement, that many of the countries' unvaccinated people still need to quarantine when they arrive. So
this is a good point, Rick, for those on the call. And by the way, we have people from joining us from the ASTA Facebook page, ASTA LinkedIn page, and ASTA's YouTube channel. But it's a good point in terms of the value of a travel advisor who can inform the traveler, keep the traveler up to date for these ever-changing rules in terms of what you do and don't need from a testing perspective, a vaccine perspective. So always check with your travel advisor before taking a trip, or as you make the booking, to ensure that you can comply, right?
Yes. Okay. Anne Smith was asking about why can't infant sail on a cruise with it's 3 or more days at sea. That's the line's policy. And also Helen mentioned that some lines like Virgin are requiring passports even for closed loop cruises. Again, we did reach out to the State Department, and they said that airlines and cruise lines are allowed to enact their own terms of carriage, that they can require additional documentation, and they can require that children be a certain age to travel. The basic reason of that, in my opinion, is that people think that cruise lines have a hospital. They really don't have a hospital. They have an infirmary, and which is one of the reasons why expectant mothers, they don't want them traveling past a certain date, because they could have complications. And when you're at sea, that they don't have a NICU, they don't have an operating room most times, and it's for the safety of the guest. One more thing I just thought of the other day that I had on my list was an international driver's permit. An international driver's permit is basically a translation into 8 major languages of your driver's license. Most countries do not require it, but it's best to check. If you're planning on renting a car in another country, to check to see if you need to have an international driver's permit. They're easy to get from AAA. They're only about $12. I have seen some websites that claim to be doing it online. They charge more than AAA, and there have been a lot of complaints about them. So my recommendation would be just to go to your local AAA office to get the international driver's permit. And again, you make sure that you check before you're in your planning stages and not wait till the last minute. So the question come up about Sherpa. DragonSlayerTravel.com. For ASTA members, it is part of our program where you do get a discount on it. So you can go to the Member Advantage section of ASTA.org, and there is a reduced rate for ASTA members.
I think the bottom line, Rick, tell me if you agree, is that with the ever-changing rules, especially during the pandemic, whether dictated by various governments, including the U.S. and the CDC, or other governments and their rules that apply, coupled with the particular vendor or supplier that may be providing the travel, all of these entities can put in place rules that you must follow, and And the complexity of that is pretty extreme right now. And those rules often change, right? So it really pays to, if you're not checking one of the websites that Rick mentions as a travel advisor, it's good to work directly with a travel advisor who can confirm and keep you informed as those rules evolve and you're in the midst of your travel, right?
Yeah, I'm finding that I'm picking up new clients, especially younger ones who have never used a travel advisor before, and they tell me that it's just become too complex for them to do on their own. So, it's another reason why you should use an ASTA travel advisor. Cynthia Siegel mentions about travel insurance. Yes, certain countries like Costa Rica are requiring their own specific coverages that are needed. Some of the brand name insurance companies in the U.S. that we work with are offering that, but also Costa Rica is offering the insurance from their own insurance companies there, and you can purchase that online for yourself or for your customers. And it's basically mandating a certain amount of coverage in case you're quarantined while you're in Costa Rica to pay for hotel and to pay for medical expenses while you're there. And it's so I've always sold travel insurance. I've always used travel insurance from myself, and now there's even more reasons that you need to make sure you have it.
Well, Rick, I know that we're a little bit over time, the time that we allocated for those on the call, and I just want to say I think that we could probably go on for hours about all the various documentations and constraints and complexities that are involved, engaged in booking travel. I think you put it nicely when saying that your travel advisor can really help you in this regard, kind of sift through all the various constraints and restrictions and make the whole travel journey simpler and easier. So I just want to say thank you, Rick, for the time spent today. It's really, really good information. Thank you for joining us, to all our Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube friends. And for now, we will say again, thanks for joining us. And we will talk to you and see you soon on another topic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mark.